Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't brought you a video in a couple days. I'm going on about 2 weeks, and I wanted to update this. This one's going to be obviously beyond the Great Tribulation, and I do believe we are in those times. I believe it being closer to the beginning of the tribulation, where the rapture does happen. And all around the world, we are seeing record numbers of animals and people dying off in almost every sector. It will never be recorded by the cabal because they don't want us to realize that those events are happening. And the holy books are based off the older books which were around during those times in which those raptures happened. It's the same thing for Lemuria. When most of those guys died, half of their books got transferred to Sumer and Akkad, and now we have the Bible and various other forms in the Torah, among other holy books which talk about the Great Tribulation. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this because I feel very strongly about what is actually going on and what is probably getting to a point now where we should start looking around and watching for these events, because remember, the world was set up in a way so that basically the religions ruled over the people. Whether or not you believe in the religions is almost null and void, because the banks, even in the early days, set up the religions so that they could bring up the world and bring down the world by what they believe to be a control variable of what they believe to be religious law. And so when they bring it down, they will use the religions. Now, I wonder just how much of it actually happens as they control it and how much of it happens after the facts. Now, there's so much for me to get into, folks. I'm not a minister or priest in any sort of fashion, so I'm not going to basically rattle off huge amounts of quotes referring to the Bible. I have various sources which I will read. And basically what the Great Tribulation is that basically the world succumbs to its sins and basically destroys itself, and at the end God comes and allows those people who have survived to leave with him. And then there are those that believe the rapture will actually happen in the beginning. And then there are those who believe that there is going to be a pre- and a post-rapture. But in any case, wherever your mental momentum is, where I am, folks, is that the main reason for the Great Tribulation, there's basically three major events. There's the world turning into chaos, which we see all around us. No nation is without its turmoil. We see the world turning in on itself with vigilante groups, terror groups, all kinds of things like we see now. We see the world populations dying off, which is happening now. And basically the world burning in embers. And then at the end of a 7-year period, I'm just going to speak plainly, there is supposedly the Messiah, which comes back and brings back the world back to stabilized form, and then that's when supposedly all the chosens will go with Christ and everything will be good. A little bit about what it is and what it isn't, and people will say Christ will come in the beginning to spare those who have not yet sinned of all the bad things coming. There are those who say, no, there's no point in Christ coming before and after the rapture. And I've been watching a lot of Imran Hussain of Islam, and he's talking a lot about the Mahdi coming, and watch for the Mahdi, because when Islam basically comes in and says that the Mahdi is here, that is when basically it signals that the end times have shown themselves. I won't go into that because that's not what my belief is. But basically, they have a couple identifying markers, and then ours, or at least the Christian view, is that Jesus will be there in the end, and they have somebody on their end that will be there with Christ, supposedly. And it's debatable whether or not you'll actually see people floating around and coming back from the dead to visit those who have survived and to take them with them. And all the other things, that part is still heavily speculated. Most people believe there will be basically two raptures. One precursor, which I think we're in right now. One during, and that's when all hell falls apart. That's when you're supposed to be, in like a year or two with no electricity, the nukes go off, the earth gets gassed, the bioweapons are used, and then a year or two later everything stabilizes, and that's when all the super NWO government comes out, and there's basically, peace and harmony, and all the super technologies come out. We're allowed to go to Mars and stuff daily, and everything else. Whether or not Christ shows up, well, that's your belief and your system that says, if I survive this great test, Christ will come and get me. Well, there's some that say Christ will also spare you from the Great Tribulation. So it depends on whose version you actually listen to and whose version you think you believe in. But there is a large record of people that have been dying. Animals have been dying off. Zoos and lots of other places, including prisons, have been recording these large number of deaths. Largest records that we've been able to have ever. And that's one of the biggest signs, is that there are all these things going on. So without further ado, I'm going to start going through some of this for you. Let's see here. There's a lot of references to the actual Great Tribulation. Daniel 9:24, Revelation 6:18, Daniel 9:24 through 27 actually has an article on the tribulation. Matthew 24:21, Jesus says, "For then there will be a great tribulation, such as none have occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor shall ever." In this verse, Jesus referring to Matthew 24:15, which describes revealing the abomination and desolation, the man also knows as the Antichrist. Also, Jesus, Matthew 24:29 through 30, states, "Immediately after tribulation of those days, Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming to the clouds in the sky with the power and the glory." There's a lot of these folks. I'm not going to go through them because unfortunately these are not in order. And, it's all about what your perception is in terms of the order of these. But basically, Daniel 12:1b, "And there will be a time distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time." It seems that Jesus was quoting a verse he spoke in the words recorded by Matthew 24:21, also referring to the Great Tribulation as Jeremiah 37. "Alas, for that day is great, there is none like it. And it is the time of Jacob's distress," or Jacob's troubles. I think that's the time we're pretty much in right now. "But he will be saved from it." The phrase Jacob's distress refers to a nation of Israel, which is experiencing persecution and natural disasters. Israel really isn't doing that right now, but remember, Israel really isn't the whole of Israel yet, so it is what it is at this time. Revelations 13:5 says he will be in the power for 42 months, which 3.5 years length of the Great Tribulation. Revelations offers the most information about the tribulation. Revelations 13, when the beast is revealed until Christ returns. Revelations 19, giving a picture of God's wrath. You guys can go through all these when I source them. There's a lot. I'm just kind of going through all these just so we can get them all out of the way. I'll show them in a minute. There's just too much here. I found so much, it's ridiculous. And then I want to go into the actual sources of all the deaths going on. It does say in this one, evidence for God. There is a difference between the tribulation and the wrath. It's somebody giving off their opinion. I'm not going to, because I'm not going to get into my opinion on this. But basically, these are the events that follow a false Christ: wars, famine, earthquakes, great tribulation of believers, gospel preached to all nations, astronomical signs, return of Christ, rapture of believers. Now, why would there be a rapture of believers? That's when he comes and relieves you. It wouldn't be a rapture. The rapture would be before. It would spare you from the tests, but that's fine. I understand how it's written. It was written by those people back then, and I'm not even saying that my interpretation is different. I'm just saying the way it was written, and the way everything was this way or that way. So anyways, folks, I'm just trying to give you a good idea of what this is like. So supposedly there's 3.5 years of this thing building up, which according to the Torah and the Bible is about the amount of time, and then it takes about 3 years after everything goes to absolute chaos for anything to really scale down. I think we're at the point where things are about to just go. So I'm not going to read half of these because it just goes into like the devil having horns and hath been there a short time, and it really doesn't give you good details on the situation. Like I said, I'm not really a minister or anything, so me reading those quotes wouldn't do me much. But what I will go into is everything that I want to show you. I'm trying to figure out which way to do this. You know what? I'm just going to do this in the order that I have it. Record numbers of animals dying, end times prophecy, animal deaths, birds, fish, end times, mass animal deaths for 2016, honeybees are dying, planet is dying, whales are dying here, folks, record number near Argentina. I mean, 308 dead were recorded in the waters in Pennsylvania Valdez. I mean, every one of these has a bunch more. MSNBC, all animals dying record numbers due to the BP oil spill. Yeah, BP oil spill, but the numbers were highest. That was a long list of animals, folks. We lost a long list of the ecosystem when that happened. Why are animals dying? Birds, fish wiped out, mysterious deaths. This has to do with the Gulf again. Why are record numbers of manatees dying? So there's record number of manatees. This one's talking about a record number of animals dying at the Kiev Zoo. I'm sorry, I have a lot of pages loading, so there aren't a lot. Here we go. Good. I knew if I stepped out of it for a minute, it would go. Science, NBC News, shocking number of animals dying at the Kiev Zoo. And it flips again. There we go. They've collapsed and died in their enclosure. Kiev Zoo. Remember, Kiev is supposed to be a very Christian, my bad. A very Christian, very esque country. Well, country being Russia, of course. So this one goes into all the. Let's see here. The search results are record number of people dying. Independent record number of prison deaths due to cuts and overcrowding. We have, here we go. Record number of prison deaths due to cuts and overcrowding. So you get the idea there. Number of people dying in prisons have risen over the highest levels ever seen. Began 30 years ago, but Ministry of Justice of the United Kingdom saw that. They saw that happen in the United Kingdom. It'd be like our Department of Justice. This one's on Belief Blog. Record number of terrorist attacks and debt. Record high report show. So it's loading. Here we go. It's coming from CNN. More than 8,500 terrorists and 15,500 people last year. As violence tore through Africa, Asia, Middle East. I mean, this is huge, folks. A 69% rise in attacks, 89% jump in fatalities since 2011. This is on Afghanistan. There's a really good part in Afghanistan about this. So, we'll see what this is about. So, here's the Afghanistan one. Record number of Afghan citizens died in 2011, mostly insurgent attacks, UN says. Coming from Kabul. This one's coming from CNN via the Pentagon of the United States. And I'm letting it load. Here we go. Hang on one second. It's still loading. There we go. Hang on one sec. Okay, here we go. Pentagon reports record number of suicides. As you know, if you're following, it says that 22 American veterans have died each day from suicides alone. That's the general statistic. That is not from that site. I'm taking you to ABC News. ABC News. Oop, my bad. Record deaths in Japan spurs new business like hotel for dead or for the dead. So they're trying to make business out of this. So there's a bunch here, folks. I mean, it's just where you're willing to look and where you're not. Let's see here. Fox News has a census, records 1 in 3 in U.S. counties are now dying. So we're not only seeing death of people, death of animals, we're now seeing death of government communities. Census shows 1 in 3 U.S. counties are dying off. It's by Fox News Politics. This is by brown.senate.gov. With record number of Ohioans dying of drug overdoses, Senator Brown announces legislation that would substantially increase access to drug treatment for addicted people to opiates. So there's that. We have Ohio. Sorry, this is Australia. Australians dying overseas in record number. As soon as this loads. Alright, I'm waiting for this. This was up earlier, so whatever is taking this, there it is. Australians dying overseas in record numbers. Trying to scroll. Alright, well, it was published 3 years ago, folks, but as of right now, it's still appropriate. It just shows you what is going on and what isn't. This is coming from NPR.org. Record number of inmates' death has Florida prisons on defensive. So not only is it happening in the United Kingdom, it's happening in the United States and in Florida. So that's huge. Healthcare news. Deaths by medical mistakes hits record high. So in other words, these guys can't even keep these guys alive long enough to do anything. So that's obviously something to do with everything. State records. There we go. Go back. The way it is designed remains part of the problem. Yeah, well, still, it's part of the system. And everybody seems to be dying off, especially all the celebrities. Look at the celebrities. We had, what, 5 in 1 week? I mean, that's like when about time Obama took office. There were like 11 celebrities, including Bernie Mac and Jackson, that died off like in a 1 week period. I mean, it was just boom, one after the other. It's coming from CBS News. More troops dying in Afghanistan than Iraq. CBS, so there's some of that. It's coming from Science Tech. Number of people dying, unbearable heat set to double this century. I know some of these are less quality than others, but these are record numbers, folks. I mean, I know I'm not sitting here rattling off the statistics to you, but this is actually a big situation. Sorry. So, I mean, this is pretty much the pre-rapture setting, if not the Great Tribulation or the pre-tribulation setting. I mean, these things are actually happening. I had an article I put up on America 2.0 about 3 days ago. Talked about how a large number of Chinese billionaires have gone missing and or died off in like the last couple of weeks. And all these guys and all their money just simply has disappeared. They could all be going with their families to other areas. They could all be doing lots of things. They could all be dying off for all we know. But there is a lot going on here, and it is a lot more than just somebody doing something and saying something and us sitting here expecting it to be absolutely true. I have actually witnessed the last couple of years various signs of the tribulation coming to pass. Now, the tribulation part, I don't want to say has happened or will happen in the next 6 months or so, because we haven't seen a large number of markers, but the rapture is taking place. There are a large number of bodies leaving. Whether or not you want to say peacefully or violently, you can go ahead and do so. My family took care of a large, well, it started off with 2 or 3 feral cats that used to come around. They had a couple of offspring, and there for a while we were feeding about anywhere from 4 to about 8 different cats that were outside. And then after that, they were pretty much around, and like the last month or so, well, pretty much like 6 months ago, they all pretty much died off in record number, oddly enough. Now, we still think that something was introduced into the area to thin them off, because they all got fixed, and then all of a sudden they started dying off. But regardless of statistics, regardless of facts, they all did start dying off. So it did happen, so these facts are still true. So everything has actually been this way. It doesn't matter how it happens, it matters that it happens. These are all signs of the Great Tribulation to come, folks. And where we are basically is the point where the Great Tribulation begins. Remember, there's like 3.5 years leading up to it, and then 3.5 years of it, and then basically supposedly coming of Christ and the peace that follows. Where I think we are is we are on the cusp of the actual violence, where the vigilante groups get together and they start doing bad things to the people doing bad things, and then all H-bombs and bioweapons and everything else get released. But I also think we're in a point where we have actually been saved from several of those accounts taking place already. So whether or not that will actually go to absolute fruition is still to be decided. But there will be a large amount of time where I think the power will go out and violence will happen against neighbor, and a lot more coming. So there is going to be a lot of that. And I still think we are in the pre-tribulation stages. And I think everything leading up to the rapture is saying that these people, these animals, are dying off in record number. The amount of governments, counties, and even governments getting taken over and stuff internationally in various forms is a sign of things to come. So these are all signs that we can interpret from our texts. Thank you. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't brought you a video in a couple days. I'm going on about 2 weeks, and I wanted to update this. This one's going to be obviously beyond the Great Tribulation, and I do believe we are in those times. I believe it being closer to the beginning of the tribulation where the rapture does happen. And all around the world we are seeing record numbers of animals and people dying off in almost every sector. It will never be recorded by the cabal because they don't want us to realize that those events are happening. And the holy books are based off the older books, priest in any sort of fashion, so I'm not going to basically rattle off huge amounts of quotes referring to the Bible. I have various sources which I will read. And basically what the Great Tribulation is that basically the world succumbs to its sins and basically destroys itself, and at the end God comes and allows those people who have survived to leave with him. And then there are those that believe the rapture will actually happen in the beginning. And then there are those who believe that there is going to be a pre and a post rapture. But in any case, which were around during those times in which those raptures happened. It's the same thing for Lemuria. When most of those guys died, half of their books got transferred to Sumer and Akkad. And now we have the Bible and various other forms in the Torah, among other holy books which talk about the Great Tribulation. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this because I feel very strongly about what is actually going on and what is probably getting to a point now where we should start looking around and watching for these events, because remember, the world was set up in a way so that basically the religions ruled over the people. Whether or not you believe in the religions is almost null and void, because the banks, even in the early days, set up their religions so that they could bring up the world and bring down the world by what they believe to be a control variable of what they believe to be religious law. And so when they bring it down, they will use the religions. Now, I wonder just how much of it actually happens as they control it and how much of it happens after the facts. Now, there's so much for me to get into, folks. I'm not a minister or priest. Wherever your mental momentum is, where I am, folks, is that the main reason for the Great Tribulation, there's basically three major events. There's the world turning into chaos, which we see all around us. No nation is without its turmoil. We see the world turning in on itself with vigilante groups, terror groups, all kinds of things like we see now. We see the world populations dying off, which is happening now. And basically the world burning in embers. And then at the end of a 7-year period, I'm just going to speak plainly, there is supposedly the Messiah